Welcome to TWitWoW, the best wrestling podcast made for wrestling fans, by wrestling fans, on the web today. I'm John, that's my cohort and commentary, Ashton, and this is our NXT review. And I gotta say, guys, I thoroughly enjoyed tonight's episode of NXT. So much so, in fact, that before we went live, I told my cohort and commentary here that I preferred it for the second straight week to Lucha Underground. I had a shit ton of fun with Lucha Underground tonight, but I'm telling you, man, having a sense of purpose for NXT like they have these past 2 weeks now at the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic definitely seems to be enlivening the product. Not only that, but one of our bigger storylines, the one between Shinsuke Nakamura and Samoa Joe over the NXT Championship, really took a nice step forward tonight. So yeah, I think there are going to be some really cool things to talk about this show, and I just had a ball. I thought it was a great time. Partner, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, this was a solid show. The opening segment I thought was awesome, and the closing segment was amazing. And then there really wasn't a ton in the middle that really tickled my fancy, but there was nothing on the show that really genuinely pissed me off or anything. So
Right.
I can't really complain too much, and I'm ready to talk about the show.
All right, then let us get into our first segment, Heat of the Night. And no heats of the night tonight, no nitpicks. What about you, partner?
I don't know if you would call it a heat of the night or just a nitpick. My annoyance level with it is probably closer to a heat of the night, but the degree of actual complaint is probably closer to just a nitpick, and maybe not even that much. But I do have one.
All right, what is it?
The entire third match tonight between TM61 and the two basically developmental guys, Tino Sabbatelli and Riddick Moss, all that we kept on hearing throughout the entire match was about how incredible and how incredibly athletic Riddick and Tino were. It was just constantly like talking about, Tino's a millionaire. He's had, multiple NFL teams that he's been on the roster of, and Riddick Moss won the first ever developmental or performance center combine and all this stuff. And I even looked these guys up because they were both pretty, I shouldn't say not on the radar as far as like they were like big time amazing players or anything, but they both were college football players and they were both NFL draft prospects. So that means that their athletic measurables are available online. And first of all, Tino Sabbatelli is pretty freaky. This is at the NFL Combine, which only a few choice players get invited to in the first place. So that tells you how big of a deal he was. And he was a second-round pick in, I think, 2007. So he was a big freaking deal. Ran 4.5, had a broad jump over 10 feet, sub 7 second 3-cone drill, sub 4 second 20-yard shuttle. He was a legitimate freak athlete. And then at his pro day, he ran 4.43, which, I mean, pro day numbers are usually kind of fudged by about a half of a tenth of a second. So maybe 4.48, maybe closer to the 4.5 range. But still, that's incredible. That's an amazing athlete right there. And they were right. He is a multimillionaire, and he has played in the NFL. And then you look at Riddick Moss, whose real name is Mike Rallis. He didn't get invited to the combine, but he did have a pretty impressive pro day. 10-foot 4-inch broad jump, 38-inch vertical jump, 25 bench reps of 225 pounds. And, his 40-yard dash wasn't nearly as impressive as Tino Sabbatelli's was. About 0.2 of a second slower, but he was also playing a position where you could afford to be a little bit slower. He was a linebacker. Tino Sabbatelli played safety. But what I'm getting at is these guys legitimately are freak athletes. There's no question about that. I'm not even trying to call that into question. But What I'm saying is you've got two guys who are freak athletes, but in the ring, you'd never be able to tell unless you had commentary jerking off about it like they were. Because there was nothing exciting about these guys in the ring whatsoever. It was this felt like a match that we would have gotten on like a 2006 episode of Velocity between two new boring jobber prospects and a team that WWE was trying to build up for, like, I don't know, Taboo Tuesday or something. Like, this felt like the most boring kind of stereotypical WWE match imaginable. These guys did nothing but kicks and punches and rest holds, and yet they're these freak athletes with so much upside and potential, and I was just super disappointed by that.
Yeah, you know, I do think your criticism has some merit there. I think the most exciting thing we saw from these guys, I want to say it was Shane Thorne was trying a springboard and Tino caught him into that power slam. That was probably the most exciting thing we saw from the opposition.
But that doesn't require athleticism. That requires strength. There's a difference.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree. I'm just saying, like, I agree with you that it was a boring match. It was probably the most noteworthy thing we saw from that side.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you've got these two guys who are freak athletes, and all I'm getting is that they're boring wrestlers. Like, I don't care. I say this about Apollo Crews, and Apollo Crews does things in the ring that actually explicitly let you know that he's a freak athlete, whereas these guys are like a way more boring version of Apollo Crews, where they have the athletic upside, but they don't even show that.
Yeah, and you know, dude, like, here's my thing, right? If I'm giving a fair appraisal, I do like the look of this team, and I think, again, this is another case, and I know I've said this about another talent, but I can't even bring to mind who, but I know I've used the phrase before. I'm not so much interested in what they are, but what they can become, because right now what these two are, it does kind of bore me too. And I'll be honest, I'm like, wait, I've seen these guys before. Where have I seen them? And I found out because I know you and I talked a little bit today about Hideo possibly being injured again.
Yeah, Riddick Moss was the guy that did injure him.
Yeah, that was the power slam. So already, like, I'm not holding it against Riddick Moss. Like, freakish things happen. I get it.
Oh, absolutely. And not to mention, I mean, you say they were familiar. Tino Sabbatelli, sorry. No, that is his wrestling name. God.
Yeah.
The thing with this guy is his wrestling name is like a weird portmanteau of his real name, because his real name is Sabatino Piscatelli, and then his wrestling name is Tino Sabbatelli. It throws me off. I always forget which one's which, because and the crazy thing too is that, like, his nickname's always Sabby. His real name is Sabatino, his nickname is Sabby, but then in wrestling he goes by Tino, and then his real last name is Piscatelli, and in his wrestling his last name is Sabbatelli. So it's a horrible thing to actually have been familiar with him as a football player, and now he's in the wrestling world with a different name, but really similar to his real name, and it's just throwing me off. But regardless, yeah, I forget what we were even talking about. What did you bring up that I was commenting on?
Well, I mean, again, I kind of cringed a little bit, not trying to hold it against particularly Riddick Moss, but that was the team
Riddick
that
Moss,
worked with
that's
it.
right. Yeah. What I was saying about Tino, though, was that he was on Breaking Ground. He was featured on Breaking Ground.
Right. Yeah, I do remember Tino from Breaking Ground. And again, you know,
he got advice from Ty Dillinger.
Yeah, exactly. I do think these guys could be something big. I think here's the biggest problem here, and you already did touch on this. I just want to expound this point. Commentary way overhyped these guys. If anything, to me, and this is kind of another gripe I've been having for a little while, and I might as well address it now in the most apropos segment, you know, heat of the night. TM61, in a way, I do kind of like that they don't have, I don't want to call it an indie stigma, but you know where Samoa Joe's been. You know where Nakamura's been. And TM61, I have talked about them being all over the world, but I've never gotten that vibe from them, which I think is both a positive and a negative. I think it's a positive because they probably feel more organic, at least to me, to the NXT product. But yeah, it's a negative to me in moments like tonight. I felt like Tino and Riddick were way too dominant in this match for my liking.
I agree.
Yeah, if you have the credentials of TM61, I'm not saying it shouldn't be a competitive match. I'm not asking these guys to pull an AOS and kill Tino and Riddick, but you guys have been the world over, and these guys that are teaming together for the first time that are like these blue chipper prospects gave you way too much of a run for your money. And again, I think that's compounded with commentary was making the biggest deal out of them. So when the match is really on them, because they controlled like 80 to 90% of it, I don't even think that's hyperbole, and you have commentary the entire time saying how great they are, expectation hit the wall of reality, and it hit it hard.
Oh yeah, there was a huge disconnect between what you were hearing and what you were seeing, because you were hearing these guys are incredible. They're the most athletic guys, not only in the Performance Center, but in the entire WWE. And what you're seeing is boring, lazy kicks and punches and rest holds.
Exactly. You know, and again, like, I get that they were the heels in this situation, but you couldn't have really shown off that athleticism and infused it with your arrogance. Again, I do think there is something there in the concept. I like that these two arrogant guys that have competed against each other have put that aside and said, well, you know what would be even better? If we became a team. Like, I do like the idea on paper, but the execution definitely needs work, and I did not like how defensive TM61 had to be, how they pretty much looked like Riddick and Tino's equals to me, and that shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen. So I'm really glad you brought that up, dude, because really, if I really had to dig for a nitpick, I have to say TM61, again, I like that they kind of blend into the NXT universe, and they're not like these standouts like Joe and Nakamura, because I feel like that can be a problem at times.
I think what we were kind of getting at is that they didn't really come in with a ton of like name value and hype behind them.
Yes.
Like it's like we knew who they were and we knew that they were good coming in, but they weren't like Kota Ibushi, like, oh my God, this is a big deal. We need to build the tag team division around these guys. It was more along the lines of they made a name for themselves and they earned their spot, and so now they're getting an opportunity to prove what they can do in a WWE context.
Exactly. I really couldn't have articulated it better. I'm really glad we got to hash that out. With that said, is there anything else you want to air out in this segment before we get on to the formal review?
Was there something else? I feel like there was regarding this match, but I don't remember what it was.
Because we know.
So
yeah.
Oh yeah, actually I did. I did want to say the promo that these guys cut before the match was also horrible.
Yeah, it really wasn't that memorable to me at all.
It was memorable to me in a bad way. It was awkward, and like one of the guys was like, so why did we pick each other to be Dusty Tag Team Classic tag partners? Well, because instead of competing with each other, instead of competing against each other, we should compete with each other. And then the other guy was just like, yeah, but you're never going to beat me at lifting weights. But that's not what this is about. Like, dude,
what?
You're not funny. Are you trying to be funny? Because you're not at all.
I don't know, dude. Again, this to me, because I know NXT sometimes has their little pet projects or people that they try and get off the ground with. I do see some semblance of promise here. Maybe that's my optimism. We'll see what happens in a couple months. But yeah, this is going to be a slow burn kind of process to me because there's a lot to work out here. And commentary, you need to tone it the fuck down. I mean, Corey and Tom, I love them together. But Corey especially, he was really making a big deal out of these guys, and it just wasn't going to measure up. You know, no freaking way. With that said, anything else you want to say?
No, sir. Let's move on.
All right, let us get right into our NXT review. And we open up with another first-round matchup for the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. It is Glorious 10 versus SAnitY. And, partner, I'm really excited, but here's the thing. I want to know what you think now that SAnity's debuted and we can exhale. Not having to tiptoe.
These guys, I love this team so much because here's the thing. When Sawyer Fulton and Angelo Dawkins were a team, I kind of did a little extra research and I found out that both of these guys were former amateur wrestlers. And Sawyer Fulton was so freaking dominant as an amateur wrestler that I feel like he got a lot of forfeit victories because people just didn't want to face him in amateur wrestling.
Wow.
Yeah, like he was tossing people around like they were nothing. Sawyer Fulton's like 6'8", dude. He is gigantic. And I know it's kind of hard to tell because the way that this team is structured, it's like there's one tiny girl and then a little guy and then a medium guy and then a big guy, but you never think that the big guy is that big. Like it may be like in my head, I had that like, okay, so Sawyer Fulton looks like he's about 6'5", and then maybe Alexander Wolf is like 6'1", 6'2", Eric Young 5'10", 5'11", and then Nikki Cross like 5'3". You know what I mean? But like add 3 inches to all those heights, and that's what it actually is.
Yeah. So you really like the presentation of SAniTY and everything. You enjoyed this opening match and how they were really kind of presented to the NXT audience?
Yes.
Yeah, because I wanted to get your thoughts because I will just say right now, I fucking love these guys. First of all, you made great points about Sawyer Fulton, and my thing is, this is how he should be used. I was worried about Sawyer because I remember we would see him on and off, and I knew about the amateur background, and you know how I am about amateur wrestlers. I always want to see if they're going to sink or swim. We've had our sinkers, you know, Jack Swagger most notably.
Well, dude, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I wanted to ask you a question. Wasn't Riddick Moss supposed to be in the original Shoot Nation as like the leader?
I think he was, yeah.
Yeah, because that was back when he was Dig Rawls.
Yeah, you're right. It was a long time ago. I actually forgot about that. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, he was supposed to be.
I thought I was under the impression that Shoot Nation was supposed to be amateur wrestlers and college wrestlers, but I don't think Riddick Moss wrestled in college. I think he just played football. So maybe Shoot Nation was only ever supposed to just be amateur athletes rather than amateur wrestlers.
Right. And, you know, I mean, if that was the case, I mean, that would have been fine. But I think what we ended up getting, you know, is so much better because we ended up getting American Alpha on SmackDown and now SAnitY here. I mean, Sawyer Fulton, when you look like that, this to me is the perfect context for you to be used.
But the thing with Sawyer Fulton too, like not only is he big, but he has a legitimately scary look, especially with the hair that he has right now, where it's like shaved on the sides and then dreadlocked in like the actual hair part. He looks like he could be in like a Rob Zombie horror movie.
Yes, I mean, dude, here's my thing, right? Again, everybody that knows me or that's listened to TWitWoW long enough, especially you. People know I love watching amateur wrestling, whether it's freestyle, Greco-Roman, whatever. That said, I don't know if I'd be too into a guy like Sawyer Fulton doing fireman's carries or gut wrenches or this and that. This is the shit he needs to be doing. And I loved him for it. I thought this was great. I love the getup with the bandana masks and the coverings. Like, oh, who are these guys? I didn't even think they were all going to be revealed tonight, oddly enough. I just felt like it was going to be Sawyer Fulton and who's the other one? I know it's Alexander Wolf, or is that?
Yes, Alexander Wolf. And, dude, it's funny because you like hesitate to say Alexander Wolf, and I had the same experience because Alexander Wolf, I always feel like isn't that Nigel McGuinness's TNA name?
No, that was
Desmond Wolf.
Desmond.
It always confuses me, but yeah, it's Alexander Wolf.
These guys were great. The concept, I love that the theme that we heard in the vignettes is kind of the theme here. You know, of course, just an extension and stuff out of it. I will be listening to that when that hits the WWE Music YouTube channel. I thought that was great. I love the vibe of these guys. They got holy shit chants. I think not once but twice. Really
during their entrance when they were just standing at the top of the ramp, there were holy shit chants.
Oh, dude, and you know what? Like, here's the thing, and I don't know how much NXT commentary is going to play this up, and I'm hoping not much because I don't want it to be a similar issue to Dean Ambrose. But it was mentioned that these guys are like, oh, they're psychotic, they're maniacs, they're psychopaths. Even if they don't display that mentally, I got to say, it's a great freaking look. Like, if those faces were staring at me, standing in a straight line, for as much of a scumbag as I am, I'd probably be like, oh, God, please don't do this to me, because I know that they'd kill me. It's just they look legitimate already. And Ty Dillinger and Bobby Roode, this was great, too, because you had a conflict of, well, Bobby Roode, he's kind of on a hot streak right now. Ty Dillinger's super over, and he's putting things together. But SAnity's debuting, and the resolution was perfect because you had Glorious 10 come out. Bobby Roode so into himself, glorious! And, you know, crowd pops. But then Ty does a little, you know, butt wiggle with the 10 on the back of his tights, and he does 10 in Bobby Roode's face. And you could tell Roode was visibly annoyed. Then SAnitY comes out, and Wolf and Fulton just start beating the shit out of Dillinger. And he goes, I have so many Johnny Scumbag moments on this show. I can't wait to get to them all, because the first one is he's reaching his hand out and Bobby Roode just kind of looking like, man, I really don't want any of that right now. And he puts his rope back on and he walks off. And I love that Ty, with the last of his strength, is able to croak out, Bobby, ah! And then he gets picked up and they put the final nail in the coffin. This was great. Oh my God. Fulton and Wolf just put him down. And I don't even know what to call their finisher.
Dude, their finisher is like almost like an inverted DDT vertical suplex combination.
Yeah, I love it.
Because the one dude gets him up for a vertical suplex, and then the other guy comes over and like grabs him almost the same way like AJ Styles would for a styling DDT and drops him like that.
Yeah, dude, I love double team finishers like that are quick, fluid, bam, you pop it off, you get the win. And, you know, I mean, it's been a while since I've laughed at Ty Dillinger this hard because I know you're a huge supporter, and hell, I support him too, but it doesn't mean that I don't enjoy when he fails, and he failed hard tonight. He got his ass beat. Bobby!
Who really failed, though, John?
Ty Dillinger, he failed Dusty Rhodes, and he failed everybody at Full Sail tonight when he ate the pin. But we'll get more into that.
I'm pretty sure Bobby Roode was the one that failed tonight by not even choosing to attempt to fight in this match.
Oh, come on, dude. Look, I know I don't compliment you much on here, but if there's one thing I could say, I know that you're a decent and good human being, but you can't even tell me that you didn't chuckle even a little when Ty reaches out, Bobby, and then just got drilled down by SAnitY.
Sorry, man. I didn't laugh at that. I didn't laugh at that at all, actually.
Oh, so what? Ty's pain was emotionally resonant to you? Is that what you're telling me? Were you like, I feel for you, Ty?
Not necessarily emotional resonant, but I was too busy being pissed off at Bobby Roode and in awe of SAnitY's awesomeness to bother with laughing at Ty.
You know what? That's fair enough. I guess some are more multifaceted than others, and I can't believe that's me saying that to you. For those of you that know us in our personal lives, that's hilarious, because I was able to do all three. Actually, not even all three, because I wasn't pissed at Bobby Roode. I laughed my ass off. So, yeah, Ty Dillinger eats the pin, story of his life, and SAnitY stands tall, and then it doesn't even end there, because the really small person starts attacking Ty Dillinger like a rabid animal. She has to get pulled off first by Fulton and then by, well, you know, what would later be Eric Young. And that turns out to be Nikki Cross, which I love. Dude, can I just say, too, since we're really having this extended conversation about SAnitY, I love that Nikki Cross is a part of this because that immediately sets her apart from the rest of the women. Like, at a time where I feel like NXT women, they need the characters, they need the identities, and we're doing good with that. You know, Liv Morgan, I feel like, has a character that people like. Billie Kay and Peyton Royce, enough said. We've talked about them forever. But Nikki Cross, to me, is even more of an exciting case because she's in a faction like this. And, you know, that's awesome because here's the thing, dude, and I'm being dead serious. You know I'm ride or die with Ember Moon. But honestly, if Nikki Cross was really going to be the one to beat Asuka because of her backing and not Ember Moon, I'd be cool with that. I really would be. I love that she's a part of this, and I love that that immediately sets her apart from the rest of the women. So that's freaking great. And yeah, she really laid into Ty Dillinger.
And I actually looked up the heights of all of the people, and I was right that Sawyer Fulton was 6'8", but I was way off with everyone else. Alexander Wolf 6'2", Eric Young 5'11". I kind of nailed his height, but then Nikki Cross is 5'1".
Yeah,
dude, that is borderline legally a dwarf.
Dude, you know what I just realized? You said she's 5'1", right? Oh my God.
Yeah.
I think there's a wrestler that I'm finally taller than because I think like I'm last I checked, I'm like 5'3" or 5'4". So I'm taller than Nikki Cross. Finally, I'm taller than a professional athlete.
You're taller than AJ Lee too, brother. I hate to break it to you, but you were taller than another wrestler earlier.
You know, I kind of figured that, but with AJ Lee, it was more ambiguous because I would see her and I'm like, well, I may be or I might not be. But yeah, Nikki Cross, like I even knew looking at her like, oh my God, I'm taller than even her. But she's like a freaking Spitfire. She'll beat my ass. Love it. And
she's awesome though. Like she showed that fire. It's funny because like the last time we saw her was in that 6-women tag match where she teamed up with Liv Morgan and who else was there?
Carmella. Right?
Carmella, that's right. No. It wasn't Carmella, was it? No, because that was
because it was Nikki Cross.
Oh yeah, it was. Okay, yeah, I guess it was. And they took on the Tough Enough alum, Daria Baronato, Mandy Rose, and then also they had Alexa Bliss on their side. But yeah, that was the last time we saw her, and I kind of saw her as like, because when Becky Lynch first debuted, she wore like all green gear, and I saw Nikki Cross wore almost identical gear to Becky Lynch's debut gear, but it was blue instead of green.
Right.
So I kind of saw her as like the blue Becky Lynch, and then she's got that kind of experience too. She's been around for almost a decade. She debuted in 2008, So what is that, 8 years now?
Yeah.
So she knows what she's doing in that ring, just like Becky Lynch when she first showed up in NXT. So there are a lot of similarities there. I see bright things in Nikki Cross's future. And I'm also going to add, this is the first time that we've seen intergender violence on NXT since I believe it was Carmella. Didn't Carmella attack Blake and Murphy at one point during their little feud?
I think she may have slapped one of them once. And
oh, well, and of course, then we can't forget Alexa Bliss slapping the taste out of the vaudevillains' mouths.
Right, and she would even do the sparkle splash to people after matches. It wasn't like an all the time thing,
so I'd say that's the most recent example of intergender violence in NXT, and this was much more legitimate than that because she wasn't just slapping or doing a splash; she was laying in punches, brother.
And what I love about this faction, too, it's not just the fact that it's quantitatively perfect with 4 people, but I think it's 4 people that could fit the roles that they'll probably aspire for. Like Fulton and Wolf could probably go after the NXT tag team titles in the future if they wanted to. Nikki Cross, NXT Women's Championship, which leaves the NXT Championship for the final guy who did a wheelbarrow neck breaker to Ty Dillinger, Eric Young, who got, again, another, like, holy shit and big pop kind of chant. This is great.
That wheelbarrow neck breaker looked awesome.
Gorgeous. Gorgeous. I loved it. Dude, I'm telling you, I know it's just the debut, and I'm not trying to jump guns. I'm just speaking for myself personally. If it keeps on this trajectory, SAnitY will be one of my favorite acts going in all of the WWE because I already have an amazing vibe about these guys. And again, I'm particularly happy for Nikki Cross because, man, this is a shot in the arm to the women's division that I think they do need. So, great stuff. Anything else you want to say?
Well, I'm trying to figure out who's gonna beat these guys, SAnitY, because you would think that their next opponent in the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic would be Itami and Ibushi, but I don't know what Hideo Itami's status is. I mean, I've seen the article that everyone's posting about how, you know, he took that ugly bump and there's a chance he could be out for a few months, but I haven't heard anything definitive. The bump itself that everyone's freaking out about today because Pro Wrestling Sheet only decided to report on it today, that bump was done 10 days ago.
Yeah, like I did take note of that.
Yeah, like the video that everyone is posting and freaking out about was from October 2nd. And I haven't heard anything about Hideo since then. And it seems like Ryan Satin on Pro Wrestling Sheet maybe just discovered it or something. Like, I don't know, because he's reporting on it as if it just happened, but he's also not giving us any definitive details as far as if Hideo's actually going to be out for months or if he could be because it was an ugly bump and it looked like he was legitimately hurt at the time.
Yeah.
But then again, you would think if he was legitimately hurt at the time, we would have heard something in the last 10 days regarding his future. So I don't know what the status of that is. I'm assuming that if Hideo is actually hurt, and I hope for the best, so I hope that, you know, this is all just kind of Pro Wrestling Sheet kind of making a mistake here where they're reporting something that happened in the past that hasn't actually that's a non-issue basically at this point because, you know, it was an ugly bump, but maybe Hideo is okay and they were just like, oh god, that looked horrible, he's probably dead, and reported that. But I'm hoping that that's the case. But if the worst case happens and Hideo is out for months, I'm assuming Akira Tozawa will take his place as Ibushi's tag partner, in which case you almost have to believe that SAnitY would get the win over that team.
Yeah.
And then their next opponents would be Austin Aries and Roderick Strong, maybe, if Roderick Strong ends up being Aries' partner, because I don't think that's been officially announced yet.
I mean, yeah, I hate the idea that we're even talking about the whole Hideo thing because I've been worried sick. And everything you just mentioned is why I hate it so much because it was an older video and we haven't heard anything since. I don't think that tips the scales either for or against Hideo. Yeah. I hate ambiguity when it comes to potentially serious injuries because you're talking about the guy's neck, and that always makes me so nervous. So I do hope Hideo's okay because that just broke my heart seeing that because we know how hard he worked to get back the first time around. But shifting the focus to SAnitY, I'll be honest, like, I think the only reason I expected Hideo and Ibushi to go over in the first place was because that Austin Aries and presumably Roderick Strong would be waiting for them. But now I could see SAnitY going over. Depending on Hideo's status, yeah, I could see SAnitY going over, and then I guess they would face Austin Aries and Roderick Strong. Would be a weird matchup, but I may even go for SAnitY for that too. I don't know, because I really get the feeling that
you've got to think that, if SAnitY stays dominant the way that they were tonight throughout the entire tournament, they're going to run into the authors of pain. And
yeah,
that's unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. Who the hell do you have win that?
I have no idea, dude, and that's an excellent
question.
And
plus, not only that, that's like a dream match that you need to build to. That's like Wyatt family versus Shield shit right there.
Yes, completely agree with you.
Build to that. That can't just be like, oh, this happens to be the finals of a tournament that's been going on for a month and a half. That needs to be like blood feud. One team rubs shoulders with the other and they rub it the wrong way and they don't like each other now. And then maybe like one of them costs the other one a match and it like builds to them really wanting to kill each other. You can't just be like, oh, well, these are the two best teams of the tournament, so they're going to face each other in the finals, guys.
Yeah, I'll tell you, man. To me, when you put it like that, I would love it to really be built up. And hey, if SAnitY, represented by Fulton and Wolf, were the ones to end the AOP's tag team title reign, because I believe that them winning those NXT tag team titles are inevitable, and they'll probably go on a monster run. I wouldn't complain about that either.
You would expect that to happen for sure, but personally, I don't expect that to happen until 2017. I don't think that they're going to win the NXT tag titles anytime this year because, first you've got to get the titles on Ciampa and Gargano so that AOP winning the titles actually has some kind of impact rather than just, oh, they beat guys we already hated. Well, thanks, guys. Okay, now let's talk about your run.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Now, this is something that's going to have to breathe because the whole thing between Team DIY, Gargano and Ciampa and the Revival hasn't even been resolved yet. But, looking to 2017, that's just an open and beauteous horizon for, I think, both the women's and tag team divisions in particular. SAnitY could really blow shit up. 2017 could really be their year. Because
2017 could legitimately be the year of SAnitY. Because here's the thing, John. You brought up, well, Nikki Cross could be the one to beat Asuka. It doesn't have to be Ember Moon. But what if Ember Moon is the one to beat Asuka and then Nikki Cross is the one to beat Ember Moon as a heel?
And even better, because something. Yeah. I know Asuka's kind of.
That's my thing. Is like Nikki. I feel like SAnitY is 100% a heel faction. Otherwise,
yes,
they wouldn't have taken out a very obviously beloved by the crowd character tonight in Ty Dillinger. So they're definitely heels. There's no doubt about that. Which means that pretty much the only NXT title right now that isn't kind of off their radar is the world title. And I don't think Eric Young is beating Nakamura anytime soon.
He's not beating Nakamura, but Eric Young, to me, strikes me as that kind of guy that he'll always be kind of at the periphery of the NXT kind of championship hunt. And then when you least expect it, bam, he'll assert himself. And it'll probably be against an opponent that I could very easily believe Eric Young beat. This Eric Young? Hell yes. Yeah. Hell yes.
Like I could see one of 2 or 3 things happening as far as the world title goes, because I really do. I think Ciampa and Gargano are inevitable as tag champs, but then it's just a matter of whether you want to give the rub, or rather the heat, I guess you should say, of beating those guys for the tag titles to AOP or to SAnitY. That's a tough call to make. Like, I don't know, because like AOP have been getting this build for months now. So it would make a lot of sense for them to win the NXT tag titles. Or I guess if you really need a dominant beastly heel team, you could call them up without giving them the titles. And then SAnitY could step in and be next in line to take the tag titles from Ciampa and Gargano after those guys beat the Revival. For the women, I think it's fairly linear. It's pretty simple. Ember Moon beats Asuka, then Nikki Cross beats Ember Moon. That, to me, is an easy linear progression. But for the world title, Hideo's potential injury complicates things, because I think that the easiest way to go, Hideo beats Nakamura in Japan, big celebration, everyone's happy, and then maybe Eric Young can beat Hideo down the line for the title.
Yeah.
And that would be kind of a cool, dastardly thing. But alternatively, maybe, I mean, they've got to call Nakamura up soon enough, right? Like, I feel like Nakamura's call up is inevitable. He shouldn't be wasting his sort of bump counter, his lifetime bump counter on NXT, wrestling in front of 150 people, which is what led to Hideo potentially being injured if he is injured. He's the champion, so we've got to get the title off of him somehow. Do we take it off of him with Joe and then have a heel Eric Young go after Samoa Joe? That wouldn't really make sense. Maybe Ty goes after Joe. I don't know. Like the NXT world title picture is really muddy right now, and I don't like that. And I think it all stems from, let's give Nakamura the title. It makes no sense.
Right. I mean, I completely agree with your diagnostics of, the NXT world title situation. My thing is this conversation with how spirited and just in-depth it put me in the mood to see SAnitY with all those titles. Because even when you look at the vignettes, it's all about, disruption and taking over and just that vibe. And
I could see all four of them holding championships by the end of NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 3.
Yeah, dude, to think that everything could come back to SAnitY at one point in the NXT universe would be just amazing to me.
That's what I'm saying, though, dude. Like, they could have a Mil Muertes, Disciples of Death posing at the end of Ultima Lucha kind of moment to close out a takeover, and that would be amazing.
And bro, you want to talk about power struggles? Like, I love the antagonisms right now between Joe and Regal, though Regal didn't really make much of a presence, but we have plenty to talk about with that later. Just imagine, I mean, Regal having to deal with every member of SAnitY because he has one of the NXT championships, Nikki Cross with the women's championship and all that stuff. Like, it just seems to me like, oh my God, so much possibility there. So yeah, I am all about these guys in one freaking night. I think it's amazing. I think they booked it perfectly. And man, I mean, if we spent all this time, and this was just the opener of NXT, imagine how much of a splash they're going to make for us when they really go on to do more legitimate things and they're pursuing bigger, material prizes. So yeah, I can't wait, dude. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So I think it's safe to say SAnitY is a really exciting faction that has both of us really looking forward to see what they do next. I mean, we basically spent, I think, 25, 30 minutes talking about, actually, I'd say about 25, because we did have a pretty lengthy Heat of the Night discussion. So I'd say SAnitY has our interest peaked, to say the least, but I think we should also move on. Up next, we had a Dasha Fuentes interview with Billie Kay and Peyton Royce, and they're still just kind of making fun of Liv Morgan.
Yeah.
Talking about how she lasted like a minute against Asuka, and did she even last that long, and that kind of stuff. Billie does have a match with Liv tonight. So that's kind of what they're using this to build to, John.
Yeah, I love it. I love that these two are finally together trying to take over the NXT women's division. It's about time that they got this screen time and this development. And yeah, Liv Morgan is the perfect stepping stone to start. I enjoyed this segment. Nothing more I can say than that.
Okay, then we had another interview with Bobby Roode, John.
Bobby Roode, I gotta tell you, not only is the man better than you, not only is he wealthier than you, and when I say you, I mean this all-encompassing term, including myself. I'm pretty dirt poor, sadly enough. But he's also just an incredibly honest human being. He says exactly what we're all thinking. Well, everybody not named Ashton. Ty, he's a loser. He failed out there. It was an embarrassment. And it was Ty that begged Bobby Roode to be his Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic partner. But does Bobby Roode look like a tag team wrestler? No. Which, I got to be honest, made me chuckle a little bit when you think of Beer Money and before that Team Canada, but I digress. And he's just like, yeah, Ty, the perfect loser. I think it's about time that Ty finally got told off and got told exactly what he is, and who better than glorious Bobby Roode. I'm still waiting for the gentrification of Full Sail, though. You need to hurry up on that. So what did you think of this promo?
Who failed here, John? Because it seems to me like this whole gentrification project has been a complete and utter failure from day one.
Who failed? Who failed? My
Bobby
good
Roode.
sir.
Bobby Roode.
You
Bobby
failed, Ty! You failed! That's who failed. So, oh, man.
You're a match late, dude. You could have dropped that failure bomb at the end of the SAnitY match.
Well, I just wanted to reaffirm Bobby Roode's sentiments because clearly you're being so savage right now on commentary. He needed the backup, and what better backup than a failure bomb directed towards Ty Dillinger? Now lay there and die, you piece of shit. He probably was still laying there when Bobby Roode was cutting that promo. It's hilarious. Oh, man. But actually, I do have a serious question for you about this promo now that I've gotten my laughs about Ty Dillinger about. You think these guys are going to kill it at NXT TakeOver Toronto? You think it'll be like a show stealer? Because I think these two could really do something great together.
Oh, yeah, definitely, for sure.
You think Ty's going over? Because I hope he does, in all sincerity. I think he needs that moment.
I legitimately don't think that NXT is going to give him that. I think that Bobby Roode is going to win, and everyone's going to hate it but you. And you're just
no. Let me. Okay, I know I laughed a little bit there, but to be fair, that was because Paul typed in Bobby. We're just gonna make fun of Ty doing Bobby, and then just the rest of the night. That's the joke. But in all seriousness, I do think like Ty is one of the most organic success stories in NXT in some time, and I think
is that working against him though? Because it seems like historically, NXT has pushed people sort of, I don't know, it sort of feels like they follow the WWE pattern of we push who we want to push, and if you cheer for someone, that's cool, and we'll give you merch to buy, but we're not going to necessarily push them. Because, I mean, name somebody in the history of NXT who was pushed and, well, rather the other way around, who got over and was then pushed because they were getting over, rather than, oh, well, we're going to push them and that's going to get them over, and then we're going to keep pushing them after that too.
Okay, to be fair, I'm sure there is one, but I can't think of it right now. But to answer your broader question, I do see where you're coming from, right? Because, and you know what the sad thing is, and I got my laughs out. I'm being totally serious with you right now. I think what's sad about that is Ty has like this organic character and this brand, like perfect, like he pushed that stuff, right? And he committed to it and he made it work. And we've had this conversation before where what's kind of pissing me off with the NXT philosophy is, oh, we've got these guys with an already established brand. They're recognizable. People register them. We've got to exhaust them now and screw our future for later. To me, with the way Bobby Roode, even though, again, we've had our contentions with that too, commits to his heel character in terms of being arrogant and into himself. The theme kind of gets him cheered, but it's whatever. I do think they could do something special in NXT TakeOver Toronto, but I totally get where you're coming from, because if Almas didn't go over Roode, and who was it before that? No Way Jose didn't go over Roode, and you know what you and I think of No Way Jose. It's not like Ty's prospects are looking much better, but I just think about the imagery.
Especially because Almas beat Dillinger when Dillinger was, about as over as he is now in their first match and then their second match.
Right. And, to me, but it's heartbreaking. It really is, because with how over Ty is, I just think about the imagery of Bobby Roode sprawled on the canvas after being hit with the tiebreaker, 3 count, and then that crowd, because with how over he is, Toronto would explode. I can already envision the pop, and he's doing the perfect 10 thing and everything. That's how you create a moment. And if they give Ty Dillinger that moment at any point, to me, you could insert him in that main event as that sympathetic babyface, but like, I believe in myself and these people believe in me and I can do it. And I believe it, but you need big wins like this. So I'll say this right now. I'm not saying Ty is definitively going to win, because, again, I can totally see your contentions completely, but I'll be pissed if he doesn't. Like, I'll probably rant if we do a formal review, because I don't know if we're going to do a formal review of TakeOver Toronto or just live reactions, but either way, whatever space we use, I will rant. I will say, you fucked up. And this is coming from a big-time Bobby Roode fan, but I know what's right and I know what's wrong. And if Ty gets screwed over, that's wrong. Bobby doesn't need that win. Ty needs that win to me. And I hope he gets it because I loved what they did tonight. You know, SAnitY were the perfect people to brutalize him. Roode was a dick for abandoning him. Ty looked so sympathetic because all it was about for him was, oh, I got to do it for Dusty. You know, Dusty believed in me, and I feel like I've only now started to live up to my full potential. I got to do it for Dusty. And then Roode's like, I don't care about Dusty Rhodes. I care about me. And, you know, all that stuff, right? So, to me, the story is right there. You just got to give Ty the win, and I hope they do, dude. Because I'll tell you, Ty winning in a crowd like that would be one of the best NXT moments that show has had in recent memory. And you know how they love to talk about their best moments at the end of the year. You know, you give Ty that victory in Toronto, that's the best moment of 2016 to me for NXT, without a doubt. I can already envision it. It's crazy. So I hope it happens. I really do.
Yeah, and that's my thing, dude, is... And it feels like a Daniel Bryan story where he is second only to Shinsuke Nakamura, the most over babyface on the entire roster.
Yes.
And yet he still gets treated like a jobber to the stars. He's TJP 2.0 at this point.
Right. Yeah, it really, really sucks because here is a guy... I mean, say what you will about where he would fit on the main roster. You guys already know in that regard, I do see him as like a very, very awesome Intercontinental champion, very awesome mechanic. But in Full Sail, he can be an NXT champion. I don't care what anybody says. When you're that over and you have that kind of look and everything about him, he gets it. And he's got all the tools, you know, as the saying goes. He could be an NXT champion, but you need moments like this to me in order to get there. NXT Toronto could be huge for Dillinger, but does NXT want to give him that? That's another question entirely that we'll address at a later time. But yeah, good promo from Roode. Unless you have anything else to say, we can move on.
Up next, we had our second match of the night, Billie Kay versus Liv Morgan. You know, it was all right. Nothing too exceptional. The finish happened when Peyton, actually, on the outside, who was, you know, she came out with Billie Kay. They're kind of a team now. Peyton grabs Liv's foot as she's hitting the ropes and trips her up, and then she turns around and just walks into a Billie Kay big boot.
Yep. 1, 2, 3, and it's over. Again, I love these two together, but I exhibit pretty much the same attitude you had. Like, the match wasn't bad, but, you know, honestly, like, Liv Morgan, after getting crushed by Asuka in a minute and then losing this here, I feel like she's kind of starting at square one now, and I'm just totally more interested in Billie Kay and Peyton Royce as a tandem, so I'm curious what they do after this. And now maybe Peyton Royce will take a shot at Liv Morgan, because I know she didn't face her last week. She faced that new girl whose name I forget that we weren't too impressed by. So maybe
Danielle Camella.
Danielle Camella, thank you. So maybe this program isn't over and Peyton Royce still has to, you know, get her shots in. But yeah, I mean, good match for what it was. It was serviceable to the angle, but I'm just more looking forward to what Billie Kay and Peyton Royce do in the aftermath, because you have to wonder if Asuka's in their future or not. So good stuff.
Absolutely. All right. So up next, we had another interview, although it was kind of awkward. It was Dasha Fuentes interviewing Andrade, Cien, Almas, but I don't think he spoke a word of English in this. He was just very angry and speaking in his native tongue, which is Spanish, which we don't understand. I'm at 10-15% as far as learning Spanish goes, not there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the negatives, partner, so you're doing better between the two of us, which should come as no shock. But, you know, I do love that Andrade...
Which is ridiculous, because you took 12 years of it in school.
Okay, not 12, okay? But it was a significant amount. It was at least 8. So 4 off, because, yeah, I dropped Spanish.
2.
Yeah, look, I dropped Spanish the moment I got to high school, and then I took German, and I barely picked up any of that. So I'm not meant to be bilingual whatsoever. I can barely even English. So, you know, I'm just doing what I can to get by. But Andrade speaking Spanish here, you know, good stuff. I mean, it is a heel maneuver. Xenophobia is alive and well in 2016 in America, as if anybody couldn't tell in this election cycle. So, yeah, Andrade saying, you know, who's Cedric? He's nothing. I'm the best. I love it. I love it. I love that he's got that chip on his shoulder now. This is the Andrade I wanted. This is the Andrade I thought we were going to get from those vignettes when he's watching himself and he takes his mask off. I feel like he's home. He feels like he's home. We all feel like he's home. Let's get this program underway. I can't wait for the rematch between him and Cedric, where hopefully Andrade would go over now that he's employing heel tactics. I don't see why he wouldn't. And yeah, this is good stuff.
See, now that I can agree with. That makes sense to me because,
Right.
you've got freaking Cedric is a great performer, no doubt about it. But at the same time, you've got a super hot heel potentially on your hands here with Andrade. I feel like Andrade should win this, and then Ty should win his match, and those guys should have a freaking rematch where Ty actually manages to go over, and maybe even they use that match to build him to the NXT World Championship. But
Yeah.
that's a different discussion for another time.
Yeah, I mean, I love where your mind's going, though, brother. I mean, different time for sure, but I definitely like the way you think, so let's move on.
Okay, then up next we had our third match of the night, which we already discussed ad nauseum. TM61 versus Tino Sabbatelli and Riddick Moss. TM61 win with Thunder Valley in a relatively boring match dominated by a couple of athletic guys that didn't do anything athletic.
Yeah, you know what? We already talked about this, like you said, ad nauseum in our first segment, so let's just move on.
Okay, up next was our final match of the night, Buddy Murphy versus Wesley Blake. And John, I know that you're going to want to talk about Samoa Joe, but I want to talk about both of these guys because I loved this match, and I was legitimately angry that Joe came out and broke it up.
Dude, I am so sorry, because, I know what I'm about to say is really dickish, and I own it, but I think that's what made this for me, because I could hear, it was so funny, right, because first of all, yeah, these two guys were great. I love them finally having matches. I actually would have preferred if this match went all the way, but I forgave it given what we got, which we'll get to in a second. But great stuff, especially for Murphy, and this is where the best part comes in, because it's this beautiful sequence. Blake is on the outside. I can hear your tone changing, like you're getting excited. You're like, oh my God, is Murphy gonna dive? And Murphy dives, and he gets all of Blake. It's a perfect dive. It's gorgeous. And you're like, he is, and wow, and you're so into it. And now correct me if I'm wrong, and even if I was wrong, I was still dying, so it doesn't matter. The moment Joe comes out, and he rams Murphy's knees into the steel steps. Was it me that imagined you said no? Or did you actually say no because you didn't want it to
Oh,
be
no,
over?
I totally did. I definitely did.
I knew it. I loved it so much. You took this to me because I'm such an asshole. I love watching Joe ruin lives. But you made this a 4-star segment to me to a 5-star segment because your reactions were gold. But yeah, I mean, what did you think about all this?
Like I said, man, I absolutely loved the match that I was getting started. I wish that it would have gotten more time, obviously. I think I'm gonna be honest with you right now, dude. I think both of these guys have a shit ton of singles potential. I never would have thought it before, but Wesley Blake has sort of a Tyler Breeze heel inside of him waiting to come out, except he's not actually that good looking, which makes him even more despicable because he's also an uggo talking about other people being ugly. So like the beautiful blonde Blake thing, I think has legs, and I like it a lot, and I think he's got a lot of heel upside. And you already know how I feel about Buddy Murphy. He is freaking awesome. He is going to be an absolute singles star in NXT and a really solid mid-card singles mechanic for the WWE on the main roster if and when he get called up.
Oh, dude, I mean, look, dialing it back a bit because I'll have plenty of time to laugh later. You're absolutely right. Like these two guys in their respective roles, like I knew what you just said about Blake, agree 150%, and I got that vibe from him the first time we saw him when it was Blurfexa and they were NXT Tag Team Champions, rocking freaking pigtails. And it was, the rendition of the Barbie Girl song, but to Wesley Blake. I'm like, wow, we've really got something here. Here's a guy that owns how he looks. He does unique things with his look that just raise, this stuff from the crowd. And Buddy Murphy. I mean, good God, if you guys have heard our NXT TWitWoW reviews long enough, we both think that guy, especially Ashton to his credit, think that he's an absolute stud. I mean, the look is great. He's got a wonderful intensity about him. Him doing that, because see, here's the thing. I love when people take to the air. I love high flyers. What I hate, though, is when people do high-flying moves and they get minimal contact because it takes me out of the move. Buddy Murphy got all of that shit, and that's what made me pop. It was full body-on-body contact. It wasn't like, oh, we grazed him by the arm. No, he did it. He got it done. So this guy's a freak athlete, and he's amazing. And here's a guy, I think he's one of those few rare specimens where his ceiling is entirely really dictated by him. Because I could see him, really getting a fleshed out character and really owning that. And he's already got the physical down. So his development is one that I'm very intrigued by. So, I mean, yeah, dude, for all my laughs and joking, I mean, you've got two prospects in two, very different ways, sharing that ring. And it's great because that's what NXT is about to me. So I loved it.
And they were even kind of showing their sort of individual personalities in this match because you had Blake, getting up in Murphy's face and saying, "This is why I'm the better one, Murphy," and that kind of stuff. And you had Murphy, and this segment made me hate the NXT crowd even more because Murphy was trying his ass off to play to the crowd. He kind of did like the hulking up thing where he kind of used his hands. I was like, "Yeah, let's go. Come on, guys. Let's do this. I'm a good guy now. Cheer for me, please." And then he did the freaking over the top rope suicida from a 250-pound guy. Like, it's a big deal. Like, he's awesome. And the crowd was just completely dead for it. And then Joe shows up and they're chanting, "Thank you, Joe." Like, you're supposed to root for one of these guys and you just find yourself rooting for the bad guy that came out to ruin everything. It's just, God, go screw yourself, Full Sail. You're the worst.
I mean, I do agree with you to a point. I mean, if
Same
they
thing with Bobby Roode and Ty Dillinger too. I guarantee you that if and when those guys have a singles match, they're both going to get cheered when it should just be Ty.
Oh, yeah. And somebody even mentioned in chat, when it's NXT Toronto and you've got two Canadians like that, oh, yeah, they're both getting cheered. So that is one big drawback. I can see where you're coming from. I definitely had my grievances with Full Sail. I mean, look, if you didn't like it, that's one thing. But these guys are clearly trying out there. And these aren't even – and see, I think what kind of irked me, to your point, it's not even like two guys that are really like quintessentially developmental, like getting out there for the first time. These are established guys. Like, this is Blake and Murphy, NXT Tag Team Champions. That had a very memorable run to me. So, for the NXT crowd, for Full Sail to really just kind of crap on them, kind of irked me too. I can totally see where you're coming from. Joe coming in, though, holy shit. It's funny because you'd think with a guy like Joe doing what he's doing, the beatdowns would get a bit repetitive or you'd get bored of him. But he just finds a way to really escalate the brutality. And the same case this week. The Uranagi to Blake on the floor, and especially the Uranagi to Murphy on the apron. Jesus Christ. He murdered those people. Oh, my God. Yeah, Joe came in. He wrecked shop. And still very intense on the microphone. Regal! And just saying, either give me Nakamura or give me my championship. And just incensed, right? Like, he's fucking done. Like, I want a resolution to this goddamn NXT championship situation. You're going to do something about it. We go to break. We come back. Joe's still, I want my NXT championship. And then Nakamura comes out. And this and you that reaction's perfect, and I'll tell you why. Because this segment, if people weren't already sold, this segment further reminded me, because I already believed it. But this is a great reaffirmation why Shinsuke Nakamura is one of the best wrestlers in the world right now. Because here is a guy, he usually comes out, he's all flash and style, and he's got plenty of substance, don't get me wrong. But, he has style too, and the pop and just like all that stuff. He was somber and ready to beat a man's ass tonight. He stared a hole through Joe. He undoes the neck brace. And, partner, what did you think about the brawl that ensued here between Joe and Nakamura?
I loved Nakamura coming out with the neck brace on and the title over his shoulder, and then he takes the neck brace off and sets the title down. And he didn't even really set it. He just kind of plopped it at the top of the ramp. And then he full-blown sprints down to the ring and gets in the ring and immediately gets the upper hand on Joe. Even though Joe knew he was coming and was the one that threw the first punch, Nakamura anticipated it, blocked it, and returned fire immediately. and just destroyed Joe. And he took him all the way to the top of the ramp. There was security getting involved. And Nakamura was the one, of all people, beating the shit out of security, like elbows and kicks. And towards the end of the initial brawl, he even hit one with a Kinshasa. And these guys just kept getting separated. And Joe kept on wanting to walk away. Like, you've been wanting this for how long now? And now you're trying to escape like a coward. And then, after Nakamura hit the Kinshasa on one of the security guards, then Joe comes back from a different angle from which he left and attacks Nakamura. They find themselves working their way back into the ring again. Nakamura gets the upper hand again and then hits a Kinshasa on Joe to close the night out. And like they just turned the mystique of Shinsuke Nakamura from a 9 to an 11.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll tell you something too, dude, as the biggest compliment I could give these two guys in their feud. It's funny because over on Raw, we're building towards the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view, and one of the quote-unquote bigger feuds there is Roman Reigns and Rusev, and commentary makes it, and that laugh is warranted, and commentary wants to make it seem like it's this big personal beef, right? But for what? Like, to me, when you look at Joe and Nakamura...
I mean, after all, Roman did take Lana's, what was it, integrity or something like that.
Honor.
Took Lana's honor.
I mean, yeah. And I get that, and I'm not saying that isn't personal, but when you look at Joe and Nakamura,
He took Lana's honor, and then he took Rusev's U.S. title. Roman is just intent on ruining Rusev's life.
Yeah, which, no, because I want to stick to my original point. When you look at Joe and Nakamura... I mean, to me, already from the word go, you could sense like this undercurrent of animosity because Joe's this champion. He's feeling so entitled. Like, I jumped through hoops to get this. He's annoyed by Shinsuke's existence because Shinsuke's always so cool, calm, and he's playing psychological warfare even when you don't know it. He beats Joe. Joe escalates. He's like this ticking time bomb. He appears calm on commentary, and then he just beats the shit out of Shinsuke, taking him out for multiple weeks. And then Shinsuke's response tonight, where he hates Joe so much that he's willing to hurt non-combatants in this thing, ring personnel from security to referees. That, to me, is personal. These guys, in what feels anyway, like, well, actually, no, it has been a bit of a longer time, to be fair, than Reigns and Rusev. But I feel like they've done so much more. If this feud was going on Raw, I would believe this being a Hell in a Cell match. I really would, because I can sense the hatred that these two have. Again, especially from Shinsuke to Joe after tonight. This has been amazing. I love watching Shinsuke tear apart security, because here's the thing. If they were so easily restrained, I'm like, come on, Shinsuke. You were out for weeks. Your career was in question. Your title reign was in question. We didn't know if you were going to get stripped or whatever, and you're just going to be restrained? Like, where is your hatred? We saw that tonight, and that kind of emotion, that's what makes a narrative riveting. Now, before I was apathetic about the rematch. I'm like, whatever, Shinsuke will just steamroll him. Now, Shinsuke, sure, he might still steamroll him, but I can at least enjoy it because there's a lot of just personal sentiment in this feud. I love this segment, dude. I felt like it was very productive for their feud. Definitely.
Yeah. I agree, man. This ramped up this feud quite a bit, and even though I would rather see Nakamura defend his title against somebody else, or just have Nakamura never have won the title in the first place, I'll be rooting for Joe to win this because he's been the one really kind of driving this feud the whole time, and kind of similar to the whole Bray Wyatt Undertaker match at WrestleMania a couple years ago. It feels like Joe's been kind of dominating this feud from a promo and airtime standpoint. So it really is just a matter of whether it's the thing with Nakamura's title run is it all comes down to how soon does Vince want him on the main roster. Because if it was up to me, he would have had his match with Sami Zayn at NXT TakeOver Dallas, had maybe one or two sets of tapings culminating in maybe the TakeOver match against, I believe, Aries was his second one.
Yes.
And then he would have been called up to the main roster immediately. And Joe would have defended his title against somebody else in Brooklyn.
Right.
But no, they had to give him a title shot. And not only did they give him a title shot, but they had to put the title on him. It makes no sense to me. I'm still salty about the fact that Nakamura is the NXT champion right now. And really, I'm more pissed than anything because it's become like, it's not so much like, oh, I'm looking forward to see Nakamura defend the title because of how good he is. It's more, I'm looking forward to Nakamura defending the title because then there's a chance of him dropping it, and I know as soon as he drops it, he's getting called up.
I mean, dude, here's my thing. I saw somewhere on Twitter that at NXT Melbourne, apparently Joe and Nakamura are supposed to face off in a cage match. Maybe that'll be one of the situations where we have a title change, like what was it, in Massachusetts where Joe beat Balor? I forget where that was on that one live event. But I mean, a cage match, I mean, especially with how heelish Joe is, he could crawl through the door and maybe beat Shinsuke that way. And that's another predicament you run into when you even try and think about, okay, well, how do we book the Shinsuke loss? Like, who's credible?
If you think about it, Joe is undefeated in cage matches.
Yeah, he pinned Demon Balor in a steel cage. So to me, if you had him, whether he pinned Shinsuke in a cage or he escapes through the door, being really heelish, put the title back on Joe. Plus, with how great of a heel Joe is with his sense of entitlement, he would just be smirking from ear to ear, especially anytime he walked into William Regal's office, knowing he was the first ever 2-time NXT champion. Like, that would just be freaking amazing to me. But I agree with you. I think the frustration is you and I want the same thing, because I want Shinsuke on the main roster. I want him doing this kind of shit with AJ, with Cena, with all those guys. But the thing is, Shinsuke is in like another stratosphere in terms of how OP he is and everything. So how do you realistically book him to lose without tarnishing the championship? And that's why I think if this cage match rumor is true, and it is going to happen in NXT Melbourne, they need to strike there, because that's easily believable to me. You have Joe crawl out the door, or even, again, pin Shinsuke after something crazy. Yeah.
Well, or, I mean, I could even see them kind of give Nakamura the Superman moment where Joe hits the muscle buster off the top rope like he did to beat Balor, and Nakamura somehow manages to kick out, but then Joe, knowing how down and out Nakamura is, still just walks out the door to win.
Yeah, walks out the door, or even if he really wants to punctuate it, but gets Nakamura immediately, because I don't think you're going to put up much of a fight after an avalanche muscle buster into the coquina clutch and you win by pass out. Just something like that.
That could work too, for sure. But like, the thing is, we're having this discussion and we're trying to decide, like, oh, when should Joe beat Nakamura for the title to get it back? And it all comes back to, well, at the end of the day, he never should have lost this to Nakamura in the first place.
Yeah, and you and I are in complete agreement there. I hated the idea, and I know it was actually quite a debate, online. Like, people were like, no, Shinsuke winning, it would be awesome. And then there were people like us like, no, you got to see the forest for the trees. Nakamura needs to be on the main roster, and Joe's doing amazing things with the NXT title. And by the way, and I know it's not Shinsuke's fault, because it's either he's been doing squash matches or he's been off screen, kayfabe, because of an injury. But that's another thing too. Like, if you're going to have Shinsuke as NXT champion, you'd think they'd milk that shit. I really haven't felt like the foot's been put on the gas. I feel like Joe, not even being the champion, is really keeping the NXT championship interesting. Now, it could just be me, but, I feel like he really is.
Has Nakamura been legitimately injured since that Joe beatdown on him?
I don't think so, dude. I thought it was all kayfabe, at least from my understanding.
That really is kind of the up in the air thing to me, because if he was legitimately injured, I can't complain about him taking time off. Yeah. But if he wasn't injured, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Like, you have arguably the single best overall performer in the entire wrestling business in your developmental territory, and he's not even on every episode of your TV show.
Yeah. And you know what? Draven G in the chat took the words right out of my mouth, because after I saw this brawl, I'm like, man, if you're going to do a step match, I would love Last Man Standing, because I feel like after
Nakamura's going to win. I guarantee you Nakamura would win if they would do a Last Man Standing, because that's the kind of match that is designed for a babyface to look strong.
Right. Yeah, dude, it's frustrating, because I can't even say that you're wrong. I would like to, but it's not even just the general rule that sometimes we appeal to. Oh, babyfaces do well in this match, because, like, I'm not even really paying mind to that. My thing is, again, Nakamura is so OP, like, could he lose that match? I don't know. It's difficult. And again, that's why we shouldn't have even been in this position to begin with. And you and I were so adamant, no, we don't want to see him win the title. But, to me, Joe's still doing quality work, even with Shinsuke largely absent. And then the feud takes a whole another level with Shinsuke's presence because he's that damn good. So I'm excited for a rematch, and I'd pop big if Joe won the championship back and made history and made everybody happy in the process. But, man, something just tells me Shinsuke's got a vice grip on that title. And honestly, what scares me too, the longer he stays in NXT, and like you said, uses up his bump count, is he going to be more injury prone when he goes to the main roster? Is he going to sustain injury on NXT? I'm sorry, with Finn Balor and then Hideo Itami now, whatever's going on with him, you just want what's best for the talent. And Shinsuke is so much better than this. I don't want him wasting his perfectly good health and just his amazingness on Full Sail. So, yeah, man, it is what it is. It sucks.
Yeah, that's my whole thing is Hideo was working with a green as goose shit former college football player when he got hurt. Now, again, it's tough to entirely put the blame on Riddick Moss, but at the end of the day, if Itami was in there with Bobby Roode, or if he was on the main roster and he was in there with AJ Styles or Dean Ambrose, or, this one's a little bit more arguable, but Seth Rollins, he wouldn't have had that exact same spot happen to him. And hell, if you want to talk about the same move, how many power slams have guys like Randy Orton and Goldust delivered, never having any kind of a problem like that,
Right.
So, it's, even though it's tough to consciously put all of the blame on the shoulders of a guy who's as green as Riddick Moss botching a power slam, I think it's part on him and an even bigger part on the decision makers in NXT for putting Hideo in the ring with him in the first place. That's and even an even bigger part of the blame on the main roster decision makers for not wanting to call him up sooner. They're the whole thing with NXT being this third brand is a bunch of horse shit, because at the end of the day, these guys are still wrestling in front of 100, 150 people for house shows, not making any money, wasting away these bumps and all of these great matches for nothing, for nothing at all. It's they need to get their priorities straight. And the crazy thing is, see, John, I hate the idea of told you so radio, where we get on here and just constantly preach about all of the things that we said they should have done, then they didn't do, and now they're regretting not doing. But you had a draft, for fuck's sakes. You could have called up a dozen or two legitimately talented, experienced performers from NXT. First of all, you limited yourself to 6. And second of all, 3 of the 6, really 4 if you count Nia, were complete opposite types of the people that you need to be calling up from NXT. The people that need to get called up from NXT are the people that have been in TNA and don't need any more practice on how to work in front of a camera. The people that have worked in Japan and have refined their ability to work in front of a camera and are already 9 to 10 out of 10 in the ring. And the people who have been in NXT long enough to have earned an opportunity at the main roster. And yet Bayley wasn't called up during the draft, and that was kind of that third category. Austin Aries and Bobby Roode and Samoa Joe weren't called up in the draft, and that was like the first category. And then you also had guys like Hideo and Nakamura who weren't called up during the draft. Those were all people that we suggested, not only suggested, but we did a freaking mock draft. And I'm pretty sure all of those people were on the main roster according to our mock draft. But the WWE did it completely different. And in my opinion, and I think most people would agree with me, they did it the wrong way.
Right. Yeah, I mean, dude, I agree with everything you just said. I don't even really think I could add anything substantive to what you just said. It's just, this is the most frustrating predicament to be a part of.
Dude, Axel Diaz in chat makes a great point. James Ellsworth is a 14-year pro, and he still made a rookie mistake by tucking his chin while taking the Styles Clash. But AJ Styles, being the consummate pro that he is, compensated, saved Ellsworth's neck from getting broken, and basically did what a pro like AJ Styles can do that somebody like Riddick Moss doesn't necessarily know how to do yet.
Exactly. Exactly. And really, the only thing I have to say about this whole NXT, like, guys should be called up when they have the air about them, like a Nakamura or a Joe or an Itami. I gotta tell you, man, and this is just me being, very real with everybody for a second, reading about what happened with Hideo, and we don't know the specifics yet, so I don't want to be hyperbolic, but it was ugly. Anybody could look at the video and they could say that the bump was ugly, whether or not Hideo came out of it okay.
Yeah.
And it really shook me up, man. I'm not going to lie, because, Hideo was just out for over a year with the shoulder injury. And now he could have neck problems. And the word neck and injury, especially, in wrestling, always, again, sends a shiver down my spine.
Immediately, I think of Austin and Tyson Kidd.
Yeah, Austin, Tyson Kidd, Benoit, just careers that are never really the same after neck injuries. And to me, like, I went from sadness.
Career-threatening neck injury that I didn't know about?
I feel like maybe not a career but it was like a really bad neck injury he suffered from in his WWE career at one point. Edge would be another one too, because I know he had neck problems.
Edge was the other one that I would have thought of, but I didn't know about Benoit.
Right. But my point being, I was really sad, and then I became angry because I'm like, wait a minute, Hideo, who was like this huge name in Japan, Kenta, fucking the originator of the GTS, and now he's taking it back and all that stuff, and I'm like, he's in NXT, and I'm not saying the crowd isn't grateful. Crowd loves Hideo, that's fine. But he had a serious injury with the shoulder, again, well over a year. Had to be fucking frustrating for him rehabbing. And now potentially, and I want to stress potentially, I don't want to start a mob here, with the neck. And I'm like, here is this guy, this really revered performer. One very serious injury and another potentially, serious injury with the neck. And you're doing it for peanuts? Like and that's really what I think made me angry. I'm like, it's bad enough when it happens, period, because wrestling careers can be very fragile at times, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing with Hideo.
And that's another thing, you say for peanuts. I mean, the rumor for Nakamura is that he is making 7 figures, so that's just bad business on the WWE's part, not protecting their investment.
Yeah, not protecting their investment. And here's another thing. Like, I stand corrected. Okay, I will redact my phrase. Peanuts, but I will say, if you're going to put 7 figures on the table, why not do it where they can promote your actual product? Like, Nakamura should be getting 7 figures for his WrestleMania entrance.
The crazy thing with Nakamura was I actually looked WWE shop numbers up, and Nakamura has the 3rd highest selling T-shirt at full price on WWE shop, and he's not even on the main roster. Imagine what this son of a bitch could do if he got publicity.
Yeah, and you look at Hideo, and look, I hate to be that guy again because we don't know the specifics, but when you have shit like this happen, and I even said this on Pweetoff today, you don't know what that says for the overall wrestling career. Because I'll tell you, dude, I don't want Hideo to be a case. I know Nigel McGuinness was drastically different because that ended up being hepatitis, but I don't want Hideo to be one of those cases where I put in all this work, I never even got to the main roster. And that's why I don't want him doing this shit for like fucking arena, even if he is getting good money. I want thousands of
Hideo.
What he does.
I mean, Hideo is one of the guys who's doing it for peanuts. He is making probably a similar amount of money to guys like Ty Dillinger and Buddy Murphy and Wesley Blake. Like he signed a developmental contract. The other guys signed NXT contracts, but Hideo is on a developmental deal. There's a difference between an NXT contract and a developmental contract. The NXT contracts are the guys like Bobby Roode and Austin Aries and Nakamura, where you know that they're going to bring more eyes to your product than you're going to help them in any way whatsoever. So you sign them as an asset rather than as a future star. Hideo was signed as a future star. Hideo was signed to go through the developmental system, to learn how to work for a camera, to learn how to work the WWE style, to learn English, all that stuff. He was signed to a developmental contract. That's the difference. Hideo legitimately is somebody that you could argue, John, is working for peanuts for WWE. And he's the one that's out there with Riddick Moss at a house show getting dropped on his head.
Dude, you know what? I'm so glad you made that point and you made that distinction, because now I can double down on my comments. That is so fucked. And I'm really, really hoping, and I don't really like to get emotional about wrestling like this or certain guys. Like, obviously, I'm attached to certain performers, but I don't like to feel this hurting. And I read that, man. I'm not even a Hideo mark. Like, I just respect what he does, and I respect that he loves his craft. And I saw that.
And you're a human being who suffers from the ability to empathize with others. And you realize, like, this guy had a 9-month journey. Actually, it was more than 9 months. It was over a year. It took
dude.
From him initially getting injured to being able to return to the ring. And that was just for a shoulder. And now we're talking possible neck issues. That's so much worse.
And dude, it's just my heart breaks because you look at the fans, of which I'm one, and I know like you have too. We look at acts like Hideo, like Shinsuke, like Joe. I've said repeatedly, I want Joe and Cena as a feud on the main roster. But the thing is, all of this passion for possibility means fuck all when you wake up the next day and you either read on a dirt sheet or WWE.com, oh, breaking, so-and-so is injured, going to be out for an indefinite period of time. And again, I know sometimes it can't be helped and you can't allocate any blame, but why? And I even, you know what's so funny with Finn Balor, just to mention him real quick, I read about him that higher-ups were concerned because, wow, he's really working hard NXT because Finn wanted to be the face of the brand and he wanted to elevate NXT. And they were like, you're really using up that mileage. I hope we get a lot of good out of him when he comes to the main roster. And wouldn't you know it, because he worked so hard in NXT, goes up to the main roster now after all that time and gets injured at SummerSlam, you know, because of the freakish bump he took with the powerbomb, which I will say was on Finn because he put his arm out. But doesn't change the fact that, yeah, you spent all that time there, end up a freak injury there. It just, you know, it sucks. Like, these guys.
That's the thing, dude.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think that the mindset of Triple H, of NXT being sort of a third brand, has led to the WWE having this problem, because NXT is supposed to be your developmental system, but this idea that it's a third brand means that it kind of gives you this desire to create profit with it. And NXT is never going to be profitable because at the end of the day, they don't have TV. If you don't have TV, you can't be profitable because TV drives everything. Not only do you get your ad revenue from having commercials, but then it's also the ultimate medium to popularize your characters and increase your merch sales. NXT is exclusive to the network, so WWE eats the expenses to run NXT because NXT is arguably the number one driver of people to buy the network, behind the fact that you get pay-per-views on the network. So NXT is not so much a third brand as it is a glorified advertisement for the WWE network in the eyes of the money people. So
Right.
The fact that Triple H takes that and he says, okay, well, if that's all you want to use it as, I'm going to take that and I'm going to use that to my advantage to try and build something down here that can ultimately maybe compete with Raw or SmackDown. That's a fool's errand, in my opinion. I think you need to treat NXT the way that it's supposed to be treated. Treat it like a developmental territory, develop talent, and when they are not necessarily super refined and like the most talented performer on the roster, but when they are developed to the point that they are ready to be on the main roster, you call them up. I think that the WWE's last 365 days have been disastrous for the sake that they have called up Apollo Crews, the Vaudevillains, Nia Jax, Mojo Rawley, Alexa Bliss, Carmella, and yet it took them how long to call up Enzo and Cass? It took them how long to call up American Alpha, Finn Balor, and guess who still hasn't been called up? Samoa Joe, Shinsuke Nakamura, Ty Dillinger, Austin Aries, Bobby Roode, Eric Young. I could probably keep The Revival, TM61. These are all finished products. These are all entities that are TV ready. You have injuries happening on the main roster. Literally, SmackDown has 7 women. Raw has 7 or 8 women. And yet you still have Asuka on NXT. I mean, I can understand wanting to keep somebody on NXT to kind of lend credibility to the women's division, but if it's supposed to be developmental, develop somebody to lend credibility to the women's division. Asuka should be on the main roster. Bayley should have been on the main roster way sooner than they called her up. To be perfectly honest, I think that Ember Moon, Billie Kay, and Peyton Royce are all main roster ready. But this is supposed to be developmental. You're supposed to be developing talents, but what they're really doing is they're picking and choosing. It's got nothing to do with whether someone's ready for the main roster or not. It's got entirely to do with whether Vince likes someone or not. That's why Nia Jax got called up before Bayley and Asuka. That's why Mojo Rawley, of all people, got called up before Nakamura and Joe and Austin Aries and Finn Balor, I think, wasn't he? No, not before, but on the same day as Finn Balor.
Right.
This kind of all comes back to the idea that it's not a meritocracy, but it really needs to start being more of a meritocracy, because when you do this, this kind of all falls back on Scott Levy, aka Raven, his concept, his theory that any given professional wrestler has a finite bump counter that they can withstand, that their body can withstand over the course of their lifetime. And you're wasting a significant chunk of said bump counter in NXT trying to pop Florida crowds for peanuts.
Yeah.
Where you could have them on the main roster, and rather than wrestling 10-minute matches against super green and potentially dangerous workers a few nights a week in Florida, you could have them on the main roster working 10 to 15 minute safe matches against experienced performers for thousands of people, drawing money, making a name for themselves, eventually leading to them selling more merch and returning on the investment that you initially put into them in the first place.
Yeah, because I got to tell you, and this is going to be the last thing I want to say about this, and then we can move on to our next segment. You're absolutely right. NXT, to me, needs to return to being developmental. I think if they did have that mindset, they'd have a much higher rate of returns. Because my thing is, dude, personally, guys, I'll use Nakamura as my template, even though there are more examples. To me, Nakamura should have leapfrogged NXT altogether. To me. Because
he and AJ Styles are in the same class of performer.
Yeah. Oh, dude, fuck yeah. And why I bring that up?
I personally, I would have even argued the opposite. I would have argued that Nakamura was more main roster ready than AJ Styles, because let's not forget, AJ's first 3 to 5 months or so on the main roster, he was cutting garbage promos on the likes of Chris Jericho and Roman Reigns and John Cena. It wasn't until very recently that he really hit his groove as a heel. Benefits of that, but that tells me two things. First of all, Nakamura was more main roster ready than AJ Styles, and second of all, it doesn't matter, because when you spend time on the main roster getting that practice cutting promos in front of crowds, you get better at it. But do you know what won't make you better at cutting promos? Is being in NXT.
Yeah, and why I brought all that up in the first place, and I'm not against this person that I'm about to bring up, I just bring it up to make a point. I think about Hideo that brought his family to America to fucking make something here in the WWE. I know this isn't what he had in mind. And I get that you have to learn English and learning the style. I get all that. But to me, he's here working with dangerous people, right? And he's already got this name brand. He's Kenta, like people know, they pop. And you've got a guy like James Ellsworth that, because he was a really good body for Braun Strowman, has been keep brought back, and I'm happy for the guy. But now next week on SmackDown Live, he's facing AJ Styles for the WWE Championship. Now, of course, it's a joke match. I'm not taking it any more seriously than a joke match. But the fact is, he's competing against AJ Styles, World Championship on television, where the viewership is, where the money is. And Hideo Itami's wrestling for fucking peanuts, now having to worry about his damn neck. And I feel for his family. I feel for him. Like, I'm pissed today. I'm pissed. Like I didn't expect to get this angry coming here, because it was a fun episode of NXT, but you and I, we've gone pillar to post this episode. We've talked about fucking everything. And I keep thinking about Hideo, and I keep thinking about just what I thought and what I felt watching that video and reading that little blurb. And I'm like, not him. Like not anybody, of course, but not fucking him. Like, come on, man. Like, it's so fucking sad to me. I feel for his family because I can't imagine what they're thinking right now. Like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, this isn't what he was meant to do. Sure as fuck isn't what Shinsuke was meant to do. And again, him and Joe did something brilliant tonight. But Joe should be coming out there beating the shit again out of a John Cena, or hell, if you don't want to go that far, a Dolph Ziggler with how he fucking bumps. And Nakamura should be kneeing AJ's face off right now. Or interrupting Kevin Owens and giving him a piece of his fucking mind and his ass. But no, we're doing this instead. Get your fucking priorities straight, NXT, because when you're a developmental farm, you know, when you've got that developmental system, there's a lot of promise there. You know, but these guys don't need this shit. They could leapfrog it. I'd believe it. If you didn't have Joe step foot in NXT and he debuted at a place, say, like Rumble or after some big match, I'd fucking buy it.
I think, to me, frankly, I think it's insulting for former TNA performers to have to be in NXT, because these are guys who have had multiple years working American-style television matches, and you're still telling them that they need developmental? Really? I don't understand that.
I don't get it either, dude. I really don't fucking get it either. And you know what? I think at this point, anything I would say would be a redundancy, but I am so glad we talked about this. Because, you know, for as brilliant as this ending segment was, you know why it was brilliant? Because these guys are far above, well, I won't say their pay grade, because it does seem like they're getting the better contracts, but they're far above the skill level that people in NXT should allegedly be at. Far and away above it. And that's why this is brilliant.
That's the perfect way to describe it. All right.
Now let's move on. High spots, low shots. You know, I was getting ready to joke and have a good time in this segment, but man, that discussion was heavy. But I will say, my low shot, Ty Dillinger. Because who else? Who else? Got pinned by SAnitY tonight, and I will never forget Bobby. So yeah, Ty Dillinger is my low shot.
All right. Well, I think my low shot is going to be Paul Little Liv Morgan, because she got obliterated by Peyton, Royce, and Billie Kay tonight.
Hey, brother, no arguments here. Liv's another one I'll be laughing at before too long. Oh my God. Yeah, who's going to be my high spot? You know what? My high spot, I think, is going to be SAnitY, because what a debut. And we gave them a substantive discussion here tonight on TWitWoW. I think they deserve to be the high spot. They were great, and I can't wait to see more of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hey, you kind of left me the easy pick. My high spot's going to be Shinsuke Nakamura, because he came back, magically healed his neck injury, and then beat the living hell out of not only Samoa Joe, but also security guards.
Yeah, Nakamura gave it to everybody, dude. I completely understand. That's great. Guys, I mean, Ashton, you don't have any concluding remarks about NXT, right? Before I take this home,
dude, I think we went pillar to post, and I'm happy with the discussion we had, but I'm definitely ready to close this thing out.
Oh, I'm ready to close it out. I will say though, this episode's gonna have a special place in my heart because we fucking did it, baby. We talked about everything. So, guys, with that said, this has been NXT. This has been TWitWoW. The best wrestling podcast made for wrestling fans, by wrestling fans, on the web today. Guys, be sure to comment, subscribe, and leave that like. I see we have 9 likes right now. I appreciate it. Paul in the chat, I know he was telling you guys leave a like, and the reason that is because the more likes we get, the more likely we are to be the top search result for NXT reviews. And come on, where are you going to get discussions like you got tonight anywhere else pillar to post, passion and logical in one glorious place? So be sure to leave that like. Fuck with YouTube's algorithm. And guys, you already know all the stuff to check out because of my cohort and commentaries backgrounds here. What you may not know, leave questions for Q&A. It's after midnight, so you've got now 15 days, still a little over 2 weeks to leave questions for Q&A because we do them the last Friday of every month. That'll be the 28th of this month. Last Q&A, we got 59 questions. I mean, holy fuck balls. But we'll see if we can surpass it or get right around 2 there. Everybody gets 5 questions per Q&A. You can divvy them up however you like. and it could be on any subject, wrestling or non-wrestling. So let your imaginations fly. I'm curious what you guys will come up with. And you could submit them through any medium. I mean, YouTube, the TWitWoW subreddit, the TWitWoW Facebook page. I mean, be sure to leave a like if you're going to visit the page. You can message us there. I know people have done that in the past. So you have multiple mediums you can go to. And yeah, guys, just get the conversation started for Q&A. But until then, I think we shall see you again for, I want to say, probably our Lucha Underground review, because we're still on hiatus from Raw and SmackDown reviews. So we'll see you then, guys. Tune in and peace out.